wearing in DC. Remember everyone was wearing the pink hats?
For what?
At the Women's March in DC, right after Trump's election, it was a big march. And so
All right.
I don't know why, but this woman had this idea to make all these pink hats, and everyone was wearing pink hats. So I have my pink hat on today.
All right. I'm going to mute everybody again. I fixed it. We're live streaming. All right. So first of all, I would like to say it is good to be back, or at least back online. It has been a really rough beginning for me to 2022. I'm thinking about saying that 2022 doesn't officially start until February. But I wanted to say thank you to everyone for all of your love and support, and for just being here as much as I know it's possible to be here right now for me around the death of my dad. And for allowing me to have the kind of time to process and do all the things that I've needed to do to kind of get things in order with that. So thank you very much. So as we're about to start our service, I'm going to adjust the microphone because I can see it's straining a little bit. But I just wanted to remind everyone, as we are back to being all virtual for the moment, that all of the prayers that we're going to be doing should be shared with you on the screen at the moment. So everything that we're doing together, you should feel free to participate as much as you'd like. It's wonderful to see your faces, although if you would like to turn your camera off, you certainly are welcome to. And I also wanted to say that because we're in our own spaces, and that I'm not going to be giving the normal cues that I would give during a service to rise or be seated, because we all have the restrictions of where we are. So I'm not going to give those cues. But if you feel comfortable standing or sitting as we reach those parts of the service, please feel free. I also want to say up front that there's going to be a couple of new melodies this evening, because in my time that I've had to kind of reflect in the last couple of weeks, I've found a few pieces that I like and I wanted to share with you. So the first one is actually a melody for Hine Matov. Ellie was tuning my guitar earlier. Okay. Is a melody for Hine Matov, and it's written by Alana Arian. And we're going to join together in just a second. But let's first read together. I begin with a prayer of gratitude for all that is holy in my life. God needs no words, no English or Hebrew, no semantics and no services, but I need them. Through prayer, I can sense my inner strength, my inner purpose, my inner joy, my capacity to love. As I reach upward in prayer, I sense these qualities in my Creator. To love God is to love each other, to work to make our lives better. To love God is to love the world God created and to help work to perfect it. To love God is to love dreams of peace and joy that illumine all of us and to bring that vision to life. And you can see there's, in the song, there is an English interlude. So, well, it's a very simple melody, but this is how it goes. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. how good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. And we'll continue singing together the words of Lecha Dodi, welcoming Shabbat like a bride or a queen. Ya la 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 Lecha Dodi, ya la 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 Likrat Kala, ya la 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 B'nei Shabbat, B'nei Shabbat Nikabela, Shamor v'Zachor, B'dibor echad, Ishmianu El HaMiuchad, continue with another new melody to the poem Shalom Aleichem. This poem welcoming the angels, the ministering angels of peace, to bring us peace on Shabbat. I just told Laura and other members of the choir earlier this evening that I remember hearing this melody, I think about 12 years ago. It was actually the last melody that Debbie Friedman ever wrote. She wrote it and actually never really finished composing it. The composition, the full composition of the melody was actually put together by people who were her close friends, because she never finished, composing it. It was kind of sitting on her desk. In any case, I heard it at a biennial while I was in rabbinical school, and then never heard it again, or at least not until a few months ago. And I thought that it was really beautiful, but I could not remember for the life of me who wrote it, and then couldn't find the music. And then I happened earlier this week to find a video put together by HUC, I think in honor of Debbie Friedman, and so this is her Shalom Aleichem. It's new, at least that I'm doing it. I don't know if anyone has heard it before, but I think it's a beautiful melody. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharei, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Lochem Shalom Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharetz, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Barakuni l'shalom malachei hashalom, malachei elyon, melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Shalom aleichem, shalom aleichem, Malachei Asharetz, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Shukhem l'shalom Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, continue lighting the Shabbat candles, and if you at home have your candles to light with me, now's the time. As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. We'll continue with our call to prayer, Baruch Hu. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Boreyom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei yom. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Boreyom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei yom. Everlasting love, you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai, our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadavarim ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha vishinantam levanecha vidibarta bam vishivtecha beveitecha uvelechtecha vaderech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha vehayu letotafot beinenecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai vihitem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher odseiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem leElohim ani Adonai Elohechem. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. We'll continue with our prayer for freedom and redemption, mi chamocha. continue with these words of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Bahamidenu Shomreinu Lechayim. We ask for God's sheltering presence to be with us, to watch over us and to guard us, and to bring us a sense of peacefulness and calm as we enter this evening. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Hamidenu Shomreinu Lechayim. Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide us in wisdom, compassion, and trust. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Hamidenu Shomreinu Lechayim. Save us for the sake of your name. Shield us from hatred, sorrow, and pain. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom Hamidenu Shomreinu Lechayim. We'll continue with our tefillah. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei hakol, v'zocher chastei avot v'imahot, u'mevi geula livnei v'neihem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. ינה אמסך מקומך נעלה ונעלם ונה לא אמסך כבודך מלא עולם ינה אמסך מקומך נעלה דרשתי קרבתך בכל ליבי קראתיך וצאתי לקראתך לקראתי מצאתיך יאי לה לה יאי לה לה ונעלם ונה לא אמסך כבודך מלא עולם. Where might I go to find you, O exalted and hidden one? Yet where will I not go to find you, ever-present eternal one? My heart cries out to you, please draw near to me. The moment I reach out for you, I find you reaching in for me. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mikadesh ha-Shabbat. You are with us in our prayer, our love, and our doubt, and our longing to feel your presence and do your will. You are the still, clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble, when pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. There may we find you, and there find courage, insight, and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service. Baruch atah Adonai, she'odcha levadcha b'yira na'avod. And a prayer for thanksgiving. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. We'll continue with our prayer for peace. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech Adon Lecho HaShalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Hasim Leolam V'tov be'einecha levarech Et Amcha Yisrael B'chol עת ובכל שעה Bishlomecha Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Hasim Leolam Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Hasim Leolam Hasim Leolam Hasim Leolam. We'll continue with a moment for our own quiet thoughts and prayers. Yehu leratzon imrei fi v'hegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri Begoali Yehu leratzon imrei fi v'hegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri Adonai tzuri begoali We take a moment in our service to think of those friends and family, loved ones who are in need of a prayer for healing. This week has been a pretty traumatic week in the Jewish world. I know that I am certainly thinking of the congregation in Colleyville, Texas. One of my friends, Charlie Citron Walker, is the rabbi there. And so I know he and his congregation have been getting lots of support, but I'm holding them in mind for this prayer of healing. And I would also like to hold in our thoughts and prayers those of our friends and loved ones who you would like to keep in mind. So if there are those you'd like to put in the chat their names so that we can keep them in our prayers, please do, and I'll read them out in just a second. Lauren Siegel, Esther Greenwald, Janet Becker, Josh Barrett, Gail and Mike Stamler, Susan Bass, Pat Adamson, Dawn Mill, Nadine Hyman, Sandy Baca, Ward Becker, and for all of our loved ones who are in need of a prayer of healing, we say, Baruch atah Adonai, Rofeh HaCholim, blessed is God, who brings healing to those who are in need of healing. We'll join together in singing Mishaberach. Mishaberach Avotenu Mikor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, a renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. I am going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment, and wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thinking about what I wanted to say this evening, I came across a really interesting kind of series of rabbinic commentaries on one particular piece of this week's Torah portion. So this week's Torah portion, we're in Parashat Yitro, and it is a particularly important Torah portion for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons being that it is the Torah portion where God gives the 10 Commandments to the people of Israel who are standing at Mount Sinai. And there is this point where, right at the end of chapter 19 of the book of Exodus and the beginning of chapter 20, where it says that Moses, led the people out of the camp toward God, and they took their places at the foot of the mountain, and God spoke to them. And that moment is the beginning of the giving of the 10 Commandments. What's interesting about this is that we then see the 10 Commandments, and then it says the people of Israel basically say, this is too much for us. We can't take it anymore. Moses, please be the voice on behalf of God, because if we listen any longer, we're going to die. This is too much for us. So this kind of combination of this idea that the people of Israel have just listened to the voice of God directly and them asking for it to stop has led to an interesting series of rabbinic commentaries, one of which comes from a dispute from a midrash called Shir Hashirim Rabbah, so a commentary on the book of the Song of Songs, where it says that there was a dispute between Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and all of the other rabbis. And Rabbi Yehoshua says that Israel heard only the first two commandments directly from God's mouth. They heard the one that says, I am the Lord your God. And they heard the commandment, you shall not have other gods. And the rabbis say and the rabbis, all of the rest of the rabbis, besides Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, they say that the Israelites heard all of the commandments directly from God's mouth. So there's a disagreement about what the people of Israel actually heard. There is another commentary that goes even further, and I think it's actually very interesting. This commentary is a Hasidic commentary, and it comes from Rabbi Naphtali of Ropshitz, and he lived in the 17 and 1800s. And he said, it's possible that all the Israelites heard from the Holy Blessed One is the very first letter. Now, if any of you are familiar with the Ten Commandments, you know that the very first letter of the Ten Commandments is an aleph. And in Hebrew, an aleph is silent. So what they heard was God doing God opened God's mouth, so to speak, and let out a kind of like breath, and that is what the Israelites were supposed to have heard, according to this commentary from Rav Naphtali. So there is another kind of like, if we're going to have a synthesis to this, there is another commentary that came from a rabbi who is known as Moshe Alshich from Tzfat. He was a mystical rabbi who lived in the 15 and 1600s, who, when writing about this idea, presented the idea that he basically asked the question, why on earth would the rabbis be having this conversation about the Israelites asking God to stop talking to them? Does that mean that they don't want God's presence in their midst? Does that mean they don't want to hear God's voice? And he argues that they're asking to no longer hear God's voice directly was actually a way of communicating their need, so that they could actually be clearer about because there was something in the action of hearing God's voice directly that didn't allow them to really be in communication or be in relationship with the ideas that God was expressing to them. And so his solution to the problem is this. The people's request that Moses speak to them didn't have the effect of replacing God's voice with Moses' voice. That is, when Moses started talking, he wasn't taking God's place. Rather, what they heard was a composite. God and Moses were speaking simultaneously together. The people's request of, and we shall hear, reflects a longing for that combination. And maybe you'll say, and what have we gained from this? Either way, you will be hearing will you be hearing God's voice? That is, if God's voice is still powering the communication, what have they gained and what have they been granted with this request? And the Alshich answers, behold, the combined voice with humanity is not like the unmediated voice of God. The combined voice is vastly different. According to Alshich, and this is what Israel was asking for. They seemingly knew the power of the composite voice, that the voice which contains input from both God and from people is not a dilution of God's voice, but rather is the foundation for hearing it. It appears that according to this interpretation, Israel did in fact want to hear God, and that is their request. They knew that the best way for them to do this required a different kind of divine voice, one which also incorporated the voice of humanity. So there's lots of historical implications for what he said in that particular commentary. One of them coming with the idea that that when we're learning and studying Torah, that even though there is a classical Jewish belief that the Torah are our the divine word, the word from God, that the rabbis classically have understood that the idea being that the Torah is not in heaven. We have access to it. We have an ability to understand it and use it in human understanding. But I think in context of this past week and what happened in Texas, in particular to the response, I think some of you saw the email or the letter that Dave and Danielle and I put together. One of the pieces of the letter was this idea of acknowledging anti-Semitism, both by the media and by politicians. And in the initial reporting of the events, what was happening on Saturday last week, everybody knew that this was happening at a synagogue. The way everyone found out about it was that it was on Facebook live streaming, that they were actually broadcasting their service over Facebook, and over 8,000 people eventually tuned in. Everyone knew this was happening at a synagogue, and people could hear what was going on. Nevertheless, in the early reporting of what was happening, there was a hesitancy, again, both by politicians and by news organizations, and even the FBI the following day came out and said this was not a definitive act of anti-Semitism. One of the things that I think that this commentary, this series of commentaries really talks about, or the point that it gets at, I should say, is that sometimes, even in this case, when God is speaking, that sometimes we need a different voice in order to get the message that we want to get across. Obviously, anti-Semitism is something that has been around for millennia at this point. Some people call it the oldest hatred in the world, but I wanted to, in my letter, point out specifically that the people who reached out to me were members of the Muslim community, including the Imam of the Islamic Society of Greenville. But what I didn't put in the letter intentionally, but I wanted to share with you now, is that I heard not from one single other faith leader in Greenville. No other faith leaders in Greenville reached out to me to express their thoughts or support or anything around the issue of the hostage situation last weekend. And I am not alone among Jewish clergy people around the country in that idea. Something was lost in translation. Whether it was the initial media reports not being clear, whether it is the kind of relationship that the Jewish community, by and large, not just in Greenville, but in other places around the country, have with other religious groups, something got lost. Maybe they only heard the Aleph. They only heard the beginning. They only saw and they didn't understand. Maybe I don't want to assume what happened, but what I can say pretty definitively is that something about the relationship that we have with other people in the community needs to change in order to understand that anti-Semitism is not okay, and that when things like this, what happened this past weekend in Colleyville, happen, that it really is beneficial to have the support of people in the community. And I think that it was particularly meaningful, again, that our Muslim neighbors reached out to us. But I also find it a little bit disappointing that our other non-Jewish neighbors did not. And I think that means that we need to change how we speak about these issues to other people so that we can create the kind of relationship that we will be supported by these other people when something like this hopefully never happens again. But if it does, that we are able to have the kind of support and open communication about these traumatic events. So may we all learn to combine our voices in a way where we are able to be understood better by those around us. And may we also open our ears and be able to listen to and understand those around us to create the kind of relationship where we can be together and understand each other fully. Amen. I'm going to re-share my slideshow as we conclude our service. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gedula liotzer bereshit. Excuse me. Shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vigoraleinu kechol hamonam, vanachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding, loved each of us for the peace we bring to others. May our deeds exceed our speech, and may we never lift up our hand but to conquer fear and doubt and despair. Rise up like the sun, O God, over all humanity. Cause light to go forth over all the lands between the seas, and light up the universe with the joy of wholeness, of freedom, and of peace. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, ushemo echad. We devote the next few moments of our service to hold in our hearts those for whom this Shabbat and this previous week are a yahrzeit, an anniversary of their death, and also acknowledge those for whom we are in a period of Shloshim: Stanley Berry and Gail Rose Carmack. And we're holding in our hearts those, again, for whom this Shabbat and the previous week are a yahrzeit: Beatrice Berliner, Marianne Efron, Roberta Bobby Katz, Bernard Woolman, Larry Cohen, Edith Giblin, Eleanor Alpert, David Fenig, Lloyd P. Gaines, David I. Horowitz, Jacob Sterling, Michelle Supp Greenberg, Saul Knigoff, Alice P. Eisenberg, Naima Stamler, Hyman Supp, Murray Weinberg, and Russell Graham. And if there are loved ones you're holding in your hearts and you'd like to share their name as we're about to say Kaddish, please feel free to put their name in the chat and I'll read it in a moment. Continue. Zichronam livracha. May the memories of all of our loved ones who came before us be a blessing. We'll continue with the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayichon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabba mivarach le'alam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit ale, v'yit halal, shemei de kedusha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace in the heavens on high bring peace to us here on earth, to all Israel and all people of the world. Together we say, Amen. I have old announcements that I forgot to delete from Hanukkah. I don't actually think I have any announcements right now. Does anybody else have any announcements? Hold on. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Joe.
Sisterhood is having schmooze on Sunday afternoon at 3:00. You should have an email in your inbox at home. So Marilyn, make sure you open your email. It's going to be just a time to visit and talk and get reacquainted with faces we haven't seen in a long time. So I hope you'll come.
I also want to say I have been working on putting together an adult ed series for a couple of months and haven't published it yet. And obviously has been derailed for the last almost month with things in life. So in the next couple of weeks, you should see a calendar. We actually purchased a curriculum from the Shalom Hartman Institute, which is a fantastic organization, and they put out a curriculum which is actually it's huge, and part of the reason it's taken me so long is that it's like 42 lessons, and I've been going through and figuring out an order that I want to teach it, and then trying to coordinate it with the calendar, and then with COVID and my father's death and everything else, it's just been a big giant mess of organization. So, but in the next couple of weeks, you should see it. It should be in the bulletin at least. So please keep a lookout for that. And we're also in the process of trying to plan some other things, including for Purim. Again, trying to predict the future with whether or not we're going to be in person or doing it by Zoom again is somewhat challenging, but Purim is coming up. So, we'll have more information about that also soon. So we are going to join together in Kiddush and blessing our children and Motzi, and then we'll conclude our service. So if you have something you would like to say Kiddush with and to join me, please do. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen l'chaim. And for all of our children, whether they are sitting next to us or you can see them on the screen or they're I can bless Ellie on her monitor. We say these words of blessing for our children. Yesimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim v'chi Menashe. May you be blessed like the children of Joseph, Ephraim and Menashe. Yesimech Elohim keSarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah. Man. May you be blessed like the mothers of our people, like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. We wish for all of our children to find the blessing of being proud of who they are and for always striving to be the best version of themselves. As we say these words of blessing from the Torah, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May God's light shine on you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha ve'asem lecha shalom. May God's presence always feel close to you, and may you always be blessed with the most important gifts of wholeness and peace. Amen. And we have a pre-nibbled challah to say Motzi. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. We are going to conclude singing Ose Shalom, and then I will wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Yai la 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 la, yai la yai la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, yai la 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 la, yai la yai la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Oh, say shalom bifromah, ooh ya say shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I am going to end the stream.